Hello, and welcome to your course, An Introduction to English Language Learners and WIDA. My name is Nathan O'Neill, and I'll be taking you through the 7 modules of this course to help you learn more about English language learners, our new WIDA consortium, and a lot of issues dealing with these students. Hopefully it'll be a very productive time for you to earn recertification credits and to learn a lot about our students. So let's jump in with the history of WIDA. WIDA stands for World-Class Instructional Design and Assessment. It was created in response to the No Child Left Behind requirements for English language learners pertaining to the standards and assessments. And as I go through this course, I'll be using the letters ELLs and ESOL synonymously. ELL stands for English Language Learner, and ESOL stands for English to Speakers of Other Languages, so we're really talking about the same students. WIDA was funded originally through the Department of Ed's Enhanced Assessment Grant to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction in 2003, and from there it's grown to include over 35 states around the nation. Here's a map, and you notice that as South Carolina down there, we're one of the newest states in the consortium, which is why we've put together this course for you to learn more about WIDA and how it applies to the classroom. The WIDA Consortium has an excellent website found at wida.us where you can find a lot of great information for you instructionally and professionally, to find information and working with your students, or to learn information just about ELLs in general. I would have you look at the downloads library first, which is the best place to start to look for a lot of information for your students. Once you click on that link, you'll see a lot of stuff here, probably too much to take in at one time, but you'll see from the top our 2012 Amplified Standards. Going around clockwise, you'll see our lesson plan space where you can find a lot of good information, and I'll explain more about that in a future module. And the can-do descriptors, which again we'll talk about more in this module, can be found here depending on whatever grade cluster you work with. And then it also has a great place for us to find out about our guiding principles, which is what we'll head straight into right now. And as we now turn to the guiding principles, to let you know there's 10 to start with, and you can see these guiding principles serving as the core beliefs of what it means to work with ESOL students and to develop the English language. They really help us give an overall framework for understanding all the things we'll be talking about in the rest of the 7 modules. And so we'll step through each of the guiding principles briefly just to give you an idea of how they work. And then when we get together in our class, we'll actually do an activity to spend a little bit more time with them. So guiding principle number 1 states that students' languages and cultures are valuable resources to be tapped and incorporated into schooling. It's very important for us to realize that students don't come in as empty vessels. Even if they don't speak English, they come full of tons of information, culturally, linguistically, educationally, and quite a very variety of different viewpoints on life. And it's very important for us to bring these factors into the classroom, to tap into them, and to bring them into our classes to most effectively reach these students and bring them up to their English proficient status. And as we look at guiding principle number 2, it's very similar to guiding principle 1. It states that students' home, school, and community experiences influence their language development. Again, since they're not coming in as empty buckets, but as a student full of past experiences, we see that culture is really like an iceberg where we probably see about 10% on the surface, but about 90% is underneath the water, submerged, and things we need to delve into to understand them are some of these aspects here. Considering their home experiences, what is it like in their home? Do they care about education? Is the family educated themselves? How is the mother's reading level? What kind of education did the mother and father receive? And as far as schooling, what kind of things has the student experienced in the past? Has it been large interruptions and gaps in schooling? Or have they been to school maybe even more days a year than we study here in America? And then the community experience of culture and language development is also very important. What are the things that the culture in general that's brought them up has taught them about language? Is it important to learn English? How is it going to help them? And all these things aren't necessarily good or bad, but they're just very important for us to understand as we reach out to our students. The third guiding principle states that students draw on their metacognitive, metalinguistic, and metacultural awareness to develop proficiency in additional languages. And here we see students, again, if culture is an iceberg, they're using things we can't see. cognitive abilities that they've developed and the linguistic abilities they brought from their first language, which we call L1, and also metacultural awareness, taking the new culture they're being immersed in here and processing that through the screen of their former culture. These are all things that help them to develop language, and they're things that we ought to be tapping into and drawing out of, because the more we can use their L1, the better they're going to develop their L2, which is English. From their first language to their second language, there's a lot of transference that we can use. Guiding principle number 4 states that a student's academic language development in their native language facilitates their academic language development in English. And then, of course, conversely, the student's academic language development in English will inform their academic language development in their native language. And we see here the principle that we're building 2 towers, one of their first language, and now their second language, the second tower of English. And the 2 towers can help each other and scaffold each other as the 2 are built. And the higher we can build each tower, the other tower will also benefit from that. Guiding principle number 5 states that students learn language and culture through meaningful use and interaction. A lot of worksheets, as you already know, will not get students very far into learning English. They really need authentic and challenging and interesting and meaningful ways to interact with language. Language is a key component of our being, and for us to be able to use it in a meaningful way is going to be super important. Guiding principle 6 states that students use language in functional and communicative ways that vary according to the context. It's very important for us to know that there's a kind of language that's more social, it's high need, high interest, and high context. And there's another sort of language, the academic language, that's very much less so. Less context, less help from understanding things that you might be able to see or draw pictures of. And also, the need for academic language oftentimes is not very strong in the mind of a student. So we need to realize there's different kinds of language to help students communicate, functionally and communicatively. The 7th guiding principle states that students develop language proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing interdependently, but at different rates and in different ways. We'll go into a lot more detail on this later, but what we basically have here are the 4 domains of language. Each one develops concurrently and interdependently, but they can develop at different speeds and rates. Obviously, listening and speaking tend to come along faster, whereas reading and writing take much longer to develop full proficiency. Guiding principle number 8 says that students' development of academic language and academic content knowledge are interrelated processes. We don't want to just give students a long list of vocabulary words for them to learn every day in class. We really want to involve them with the content of our subjects as well. And so in doing that, we're going to realize, as time goes on, through these modules hopefully, that when we teach academic language, we're actually ESOL teachers, all of us. As we teach our content, which is what we're the most accustomed to doing, we need to see ourselves also as reading coaches, as reading teachers, as ESOL teachers, because all these things are interrelated. And again, just to mention here, it's not just for ESOL learners, it's also for any student who may be struggling to learn the content of your class. A lot of these things we'll be talking about are going to relate to them as well. And seeing every student as a student who's still learning English is going to be really helpful as we move through this process. The 9th guiding principle says that students' development of social, instructional, and academic language is a complex and long-term process, and it's the foundation for their success in school. Without being able to understand how complex and long-term the process is, we're not going to give students the time that they really need to develop language. Some people think that a student, after about 2 years of being here, after having a conversation with them, would say, oh, this student speaks English quite well. But really, it's much more complex than that, especially when we talk about academic language. It can take 5, 7, and even up to 10 years. And consider this, we give an average English speaker 13 years or 14 years of schooling if they go to pre-K in order to become proficient in English. We give them English classes all the way through and give them that amount of time, so how could we not really expect an English language learner to need about that much time too? Our final guiding principle, number 10, states that students' access to instructional tasks requiring more complex thinking is enhanced when linguistic complexity and instructional support match their level of language proficiency. We want students to be involved in complex thinking. But we need to do that in such a way where we provide to them things on their level, instructional supports, and the linguistic complexity that will match where they're at so we can move them to the next step up. You might call this the zone of proximal development, or as some linguists say, I+1. We take students from what they know and we add one level higher to challenge them and where they're at so we know how we're moving them along the process of becoming more proficient in English. This growth can happen at the highest rates if we match all these things together, and we can really see a lot of great gains when we put the instructional supports and the right linguistic complexity with our complex thinking tasks. All right, so as we head back and look at the WIDA download library again, you'll see here the can-do descriptors, and a whole section here lists the different descriptors, and you can download the ones that fit with your grade band. There's one for all of K-12, and there's one for each of the grade bands like pre-K and K, grades 1 and 2, 3 and 5, etc. So as we look into the can-dos for a few moments, we want to see students in a way, besides saying what they can't do, we want to actually say what they can do. So here's an understanding of what the can-do philosophy is, which is a very important component of WIDA, the WIDA framework. It says that the belief is that all students bring established knowledge, skills, and ways of seeing and understanding the world from their homes and their communities. So, having that in mind, they're not coming to us as empty buckets. They're coming to us full of a wealth of cultural, linguistic knowledge and experience. And what we want to show them in the English language is that they can do some things. Of course, if they've just gotten here last week, they won't be able to produce a lot of language or write an essay for us, but there's still a lot of things that they can do. We want to move away from what they can't to what they can. So here are a few things that describe WIDA's can-do philosophy. It accentuates the positive qualities and the assets of our ELLs and doesn't work from a deficiency mindset. It starts from the base of what students can do, and it builds from there. As they move up through the proficiency levels, we'll see they can do more and more. And it also recognizes the importance of the social and instructional language. Again, what students are going to want to use as they talk to their friends on the playground, and then the things that we're requiring of them academically in the classroom. And it also focuses on academic language to give us access to the grade level content. It's very important that we not just develop a student's social language, but that we really do challenge them instructionally and academically in the area of their English language development in school language and in the attempts to meet grade level standards. Okay, so here we'll talk about some of the things that the can-dos can do and the things that they can't do. So, on the first column there, you'll see the things that can-dos can do. They provide a tool for differentiation. When we're thinking about grouping our students by English level and helping us out to know what we could expect a certain group of students to do, this is a very helpful resource for us. It can also provide a sampling of language that the ELLs can produce and process. So what we have here is a basic idea of, oh, okay, I see, this is about the level that I could expect a student to be speaking, or this is what I could expect from a student to be writing at this level. So they're very helpful for things like that, as well as contextualizing the access for ELL scores. Once you receive your access scores in the springtime, when we give students the test, usually over the summer they come in, and once you have the print-off of a student's scores, having these can-dos in front of you can be really helpful in understanding what the students can do in each of the domains of language and each of the categories or grades that a student falls into. And so we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But first, here's a few things that the can-dos can't do. They don't replace the standards. They're definitely not thorough enough to help us understand all the specificity of each of the standards and how the different linguistic features play into that. So we need more than just the can-dos. We need the standards and several other things as well. They also don't address academic language in all 5 of the standards, which we'll see later, and they don't address the zone of proximal development, which has already been addressed. They don't represent the language development trajectory, so they don't really show us step by step what a student will move from this to that. It just kind of gives us a little bit of a snapshot of understanding where a student is at. And again, they don't provide an exhaustive list of what a student can do because obviously with the short amount of space we have in these can-do descriptors, we're not going to be able to summarize all parts of language there. So what you see here is the can-dos for pre-K through 12 at each of the 5 proficiency levels you see along the top in colors, starting at level 1, entering, which is pre-functional, level 2, which is beginning, level 3, developing, we call that intermediate, level 4, expanding, we usually call that advanced, and level 5 is bridging, where they're right on the edge of being fluent with their other English-speaking peers. And level 6, we consider reaching, which is full proficiency in the English language. And then if you look down the page on the left column, you'll see the 4 domains of language again: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this chart here shows us at all the grade bands together what we'd expect in very simple language from a student in each of the 4 domains at whatever level they might be. And a student in listening might be a level 2 and can, for example, sort pictures, objects according to oral instructions. But then in their speaking, they might be a level 1, so they might be only able to name objects, people, and pictures and answer WH questions. And then in reading, they might be at level 1 and writing a level 1. So students can be at different levels for each domain, but this chart is a great way to kind of give us an overall impression of what we can expect from our student, both receptively in taking in language and then productively in creating language. So feel free to pause the tape now if you'd like to look over this chart in more detail. So to summarize the chart we just saw, and to lead into the slide we'll see next, the can-do descriptors describe how the English language learner processes and uses language for each of the domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and at each of the language proficiency levels, from level 1, pre-functional, all the way up to level 6, or level 5, bridging. And also, the can-do descriptors can be broken down into grade level clusters as well. The one we already saw was pre-K to 12, and so the next slide is going to show you one in one of these grade bands, 3 to 5. So here is, again, from our can-do descriptor booklets, the grade level cluster is 3-5, and what you see here is half of the can-do in the sense that we see the listening and speaking. The reading and writing will be on the next page, but this is just for you to get a basic idea of how to see these forms and how to read them well. So for example, let's just take a look at 2 of the boxes. If we see that a student's listening ability is at level 4, expanding or advanced, they'll be able to interpret oral information and apply it to new situations. They'll be able to identify illustrated main ideas and supporting details from oral discourse, etc. But let's assume that their speaking level is at level 3, developing or intermediate. In this category, they might be able to answer simple content-based questions or retell short stories or events. They're not going to be able to perform like another English language learner at a level 4 or level 5. And they're going to be able to perform more than a learner at level 2 or level 1. And this snapshot here gives us a basic overview of what to expect from the student as we begin to work with them at the beginning of the year especially. Alright, so we've moved through the content of this first module. When we get together, we're going to do a face-to-face activity where we're going to be using some of the guiding principles and talking about how they work, and we'll be drawing some visual representations of them and sharing them with other people in the class. So look forward to that. Alright, so at the end of every module, there'll be a couple of slides. One will show the group activities we'll do when we get together face-to-face, and then we'll also include the individual assignment that you'll need to do on your own time in order to accomplish the requirements to earn the credit for this course. We'll also tell you about how much time we're projecting it would take you to complete each assignment to help you stay on track. We're guessing this one will take about 45 minutes. So let me walk through it, and as you accomplish this task, you can send it to your instructor electronically or through the mail, whichever way works best for you. So the first thing is to choose an ESL student that you're working with. It could be a student that you actually have in your class this year, anyone from levels of 1 through 5, or it could be a student you worked with in years past. If you're an administrator or a coach or someone of a sort who doesn't have a classroom full of students every day, you can feel free to choose any student that you've worked with. So what I want you to do then is to find out that student's access scores. You can find the access scores on Enrich on the assessment tab, Or also you can maybe track down your school's ESOL teacher and ask them to give you the list of what the student's scores are. And of course, the student's going to have a composite score for the access test, but they'll also have a sub-score for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So just jot those scores down so you know. It might be very helpful to take those scores and go back and sort of chart them on the can-do descriptors chart to see where your students' abilities are at. Then what I want you to do is to match the scores to the can-do descriptors at that level. The documents to be able to do this are on the class website that you'll see on the Google site. Then once you've done that and matched the scores to the descriptors, I want you to reflect on if you feel that your students' can-do descriptors for each of the domains really reflects what you've seen in working with them. Have you actually seen more than you feel like the descriptor gives them credit for, or do you see less? And in that, we want you to think about the insights, finally, that you will take back in working with this student specifically. What are some things that you learn from looking at their access scores in each of the 4 domains of language and basing them on the can-do descriptors? What have you learned about the students? Reflect on that and share us your insights. And once you do that, you'll have completed Module 1.